Hello guys, Pablo here. Welcome to this lesson. We'll be covering the entire Symfony installation and configuration process so that you can end up with a working Hello World application in your local server. I want to start by mentioning that if you go to the official Symfony website at symfony.com, documentation, the book, you'll find an installation and configuration guide. Take a quick look. If you get stuck in any of the steps that I'll be doing, keep in mind that in this guide you'll find one or two alternative paths to achieve the same thing. So, everybody's using different operating systems. Keep in mind that some of the steps that I follow might not work in your case. Downloading Symfony. There's two main options. One of them is to just go to where it says download now and download the latest stable version. That's not the most recommended way of doing it because we want to do it through Composer. Composer is a package and dependency manager for PHP. We all know that there are hundreds, thousands of open source PHP libraries out there. There's Symfony, Drupal, WordPress. And until very recently, there wasn't any alternative, there wasn't any official or nice way of retrieving these third-party libraries from the web and having them installed in your own project. There is an alternative now. It's called Composer, and it's the official way of downloading and installing Symfony. So that's what we'll be using. Let me just show you how I have my system set up. I have a www folder in my home folder where I keep all of my web applications and some other projects. So the first thing we want to do is download Composer. I'm gonna download it here, and then with Composer I'm gonna create a new folder for the new project. Later on in the tutorial we'll configure Apache so that we can have a virtual host for that folder and access to it using our web browser. In order to download and install Composer, I'll be using curl. If you have curl installed, you can just run this command. It will download a file called installer, and then it will execute that using PHP. If you don't have curl, you can. I strongly recommend you install it. And if you don't want to, there are other ways to download and install Composer. So this will basically download a file called composer.var into this folder, and that is an executable, a PHP executable file. Let me just show it to you. It's over here. So that file, now we want to execute it and use it to create a new Symfony project. So this is how I'm executing it. And the command that I'm using is create project. This is the name of Symfony framework, standard edition. That needs to be created in a new folder that will be called Symfony Course. And the version that I want to download, you should look that one up from here and get the latest stable version. 2.3.3, it's my understanding that it's a long-term support version, so it will be supported until 2016. So it's a good one to go with. We'll go with that one, 2.3.3, and this will retrieve the files from the Composer repository. It will grab all of the dependencies, and while this downloads, I'm gonna just give you a quick overview of the folders in every Symfony project. You can also change these folders the way they're set up. I don't see any reason why I would do that, because it requires like extra time into setting it up in a different way. So we have a web folder, which is the publicly accessible folder. So we'll point our Apache virtual host to this folder. This is what you can access using the web browser. That's the main entry point for production environment, the main entry point for development environment, and the config.php file is a file that we use at the beginning to set up our Symfony application and to see if we have all the requirements in our server, if we have the required PHP libraries, dependencies, and whatnot. The vendor folder contains all the third-party libraries that were downloaded. Symfony is so modular that even the framework itself is treated as a plugin. When we're using Composer in other PHP projects, there will also be a vendor folder created. Source is where our own bundles, that's how like our code, our packages of code or our plugins are called in Symfony. Our bundles will live in the source folder. That's where you will be coding. Bin has a command line Doctrine tool to carry out some tasks using command line. Inside of app we have console, that's a command line tool as well for various Symfony tasks. We have the kernel, which is like the heart of the application, the auto loading that loads all of the classes so that they're always ready for us to use. There's configuration files inside of config, logs, the cage for faster application loading, and some more configuration you can add more configurations files here, or some views that will be accessible within the application. I prefer putting all of the views inside of the bundles anyway, but we'll get into that later on. Alright, so now this thing finished downloading and it gives me a chance to set up some configuration over here. We'll be using MySQL, so I'll leave that blank. That's the IP of my local SQL server. I don't use any port besides the default one. The database will be called Symfony Course. My database user is root. I don't have password in my local machine. And here's where you set up your mailer parameters in case you have one set up. English local. And this one, the secret is used to encrypt your cookies, your session. So just type something that will hardly be guessable for somebody else. Just leave that. And then it clears the cache and it's all set up.